can text it to me. Okay, welcome. Thank you guys for being here. Really certainly appreciate it. This is a workshop. I don't remember if either of you have been to a workshop before, but workshops are very informal. It's not like a city council meeting at all. Anybody can talk at any time, any questions, not just council or city admin. So it's just very informal. And with that, let's call this meeting to order. 3 o'clock, begin on time. And we will end it no later than 5 p.m. in the interest of everyone's, it may end sooner than that, but 5 p.m. at the latest in the interest of everyone's time. And also for our city staff who are supposed to be off at 5 p.m. All right. And so with that, city manager, why don't you start us out?
Carrie, would you mind closing the door?
Philip.
Philip, what's Philip Carey?
Yeah.
Mr. Carey.
Yeah. I know.
I always got called by my last name for the longest time.
Doesn't bother me.
So in the past few months, we've had a lot of conversations in regards to not only different ordinances, but issues that have come before the city. And trying to ensure that we address each of these items with as much attention as possible, and still take into consideration not only the council's time, the staff time, and the public's time. We've been putting together more and more workshops. This workshop was called specifically for the short-term rentals to discuss kind of the ongoing issues and concerns we have, not only with the management of short-term rentals, the enforcement of short-term rentals, the permitting, the requirements that we've outlined, comparing ourselves to other cities, newly passed legislation and what we can and can't do. And then just trying to reach a fair understanding and compromise with all of the different stakeholders involved that, one, are trying to open and establish a business, and two, from a city standpoint, with making sure we enforce not only our ordinances, but of course, safety and other concerns. Our current ordinance was reviewed by our legal counsel and found to be compliant on the state level.
Good.
So there wasn't any concerns there. Over the past several months, we've had a lot of short-term rentals apply for not only new applications, but renewals as well. And as part of the process, they go through an inspection. And some of the items that have been brought up is the concern with parking. There's been a concern with what we are calling nuisances and noise levels and having too many people and parties of that type of nature. We did have a brief comment provided by the chief of police at one of the meetings that they actually have not been receiving any complaints regarding short-term rentals when it's concerned to parking. We get very few noise complaints at this stage of the game. I know when this was first initiated in 21, and then when we initiated the noise ordinance, we paid extra careful attention to see where our issues were coming from. Most of them were not coming from short-term rentals. With that being said, council has on numerous occasions talked about the parking concerns, not only applying to short-term rentals, but I think just the city in general and what options do we have. Some of the other items that have come up over the past several months have been the idea of enforcement and when do we enforce, how do we enforce, and what can we enforce. Another item of concern that has been brought up is what we are charging in regards to the permit fees. And how is that being structured? And is it truly covering the cost of everything it takes to manage a short-term rental? And we're talking from start to finish, including publications, administrative paperwork, and then of course, inspections and keeping on top of that as well. Another concern that's been brought up is, are we clearly defining what everything is that we're looking at? I know that when the original STR came up for some changes in regards to the parking, there was concerns over the terminology like unit and what is a unit, and do we clearly define what a unit is? What is a sleeping area? So after all of these conversations, I took a few minutes to sit down and kind of come up with the workshop concept and scheduling it all. And so that's where we're here today. From an administrative perspective, we're looking at guidance, not only from council, but for the public to provide guidance to the council on what would best benefit our community. I know there's a lot of concerns and you'll hear the whole not in my backyard. I don't want an STR next to me. I don't think everyone knows who really is operating an STR sometimes. So I want to make sure we kind of address that aspect. There are different things that we can do as a city. Of course, we will have to have legal guidance to make sure we stay within the state laws and we don't go outside of them. But I'd like to take today to kind of go over some of the bigger items and the things that we're looking at. I briefly mentioned to Mr. Stevens before the meeting, San Antonio actually has a pretty good STR, ordinance that actually outlines every enforcement possible and how it relates. So it provides a good guidance of, if you do this, this is how we're gonna enforce it. If you do this, this is how it will be enforced. They're also looking at their fees and have currently looked at increasing those as well. Their fees are structured per unit, which means basically for every sleeping area so if I have a 3-bedroom STR, I would be charged $300 per unit, which would be a $900 permit. Slightly different than, a 1-bedroom, which would only be $300. Their terms for their permits are longer. And they do outline a little bit more specific requirements in regards to, if you do not pay your hot taxes within the 90 days after being notified, you lose your permit, and then they move forward with criminal and civil charges, which is outlined. They do have a parking structure. San Antonio is very different than Alpine. We do not have the same level of structure for parking that they have available, but they do provide a brief understanding that it's basically one per unit. There are several other cities. Marfa does not have a parking requirement within their STR. They did originally, but it was removed. I guess they felt that that wasn't an issue on their end. So I'd like to take the next 2 hours or hour and
a half, let's shoot for an hour and a half,
and kind of go through what you guys want to see cleaned up within the ordinance, your thoughts and ideas, get feedback from the public. I know that we have Mr. Ruggia here who works with our tourism side. And so I know from an STR perspective and tourism, it is an importance, but he can provide us our feedback. And then I believe we have a few individuals online.
Are these available?
There are copies up there for the public if they want to see.
It's the current ordinance for the STR. If you guys want to look at it, what we currently have, and you said that is completely in compliance according to our law.
Yes, that was one of the first things we did, was to ensure that we were meeting all the requirements.
Grab a handout.
Our past 3 attorneys reviewed the ordinance and all said it was good.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, that's one thing we want to do, is make sure we stay in compliance with the state so we don't get sued.
And then just for the public's understanding, that our STR originally went into effect in 2021, and we did provide about 4 months of leeway for everyone to become compliant before all of the enforcement started. And those who were in compliance did not have to pay the original permitting fee. So the city has been very, I want to say, very nice. We're trying to get everyone up to date, and we have been working with all of those who are currently not in compliance and who have been in compliance.
Okay. Good. So remember, this is a workshop, very informal. Anybody can talk at any time. It's not like a city council meeting where we have all the rules and procedures.
And then just for those who are online, if you'll just use the little raise hand button so that we can recognize when you want to speak, that would help us greatly.
Yes. So, Mr. Ruggia, you want to start next? I don't see anybody jumping up and down, ready to ask questions or anything.
I don't have anything specific to offer, other than, my presence. I'm here to answer questions that I can. I did have an email exchange with Councilmember Nance prior to this, because I had sent some economic data out. And one thing that he had mentioned to me in an email, I hope you don't mind, Darren, about the definition of unit that did make sense to me, was something like a contained, rather than a bed or a sleeping space, being basically like an apartment, a contained separate space. That makes sense, because one can have a modest size rental that can accommodate multiple people, but still not be a, a massive thing. And so it seems somewhat onerous to, to double the fee for every bedroom, whereas if one has, say, multiple buildings or several external entrances and things like that, that's like a logical separation that makes sense. You might also consider, like, if a building is like, say, comparing a 1,200 square foot house to a 5,000 square foot house, maybe there's a line there in terms of just the scale of the structure that you're permitting. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking because you asked me to.
Okay.
Well,
yeah, give us some good things to.
but
bounce off
that
of,
did
yeah.
make sense to me when Darren mentioned that.
Okay,
That
okay.
seemed to be a logical, because then you really do get a sense of scale of operation where you've got basically separate listings that you're
Right.
dealing with on those sites, as opposed to just separate beds
Okay,
in terms of how much you're charging folks for permitting. And that might also have a valence with what it takes to inspect and license. If you've got separate units, that would tie to cost. And so since that seemed to be at the last council meeting discussion I was present for, that seemed to be a sensible metric to go by. And so when you're looking at how big is an operation, well, how does that affect the cost of oversight?
all right. That's a good question, Megan. How much do you think it costs the city to oversee, inspect, and do all the things that we need to do for an STR?
So we've actually never sat down and looked at the start to end process on it. Given the amount of time just on my side, from what I've observed, we're looking at anywhere between 300 and 500, depending on the complexity. But that we also have to take in consideration that we do have the public hearings that have to be published. Those average about $136 a pop.
Per newspaper
Yes.
publication?
And so we
How many-
typically advertise for P and Z, and then we'll advertise for council as well.
So for each short-term rental, that's $300 in advertising.
We actually don't publicize the short-term rentals because per the ordinance.
We don't?
No, and I'm the one that handled publication, so that's
Okay.
probably why she didn't.
Okay, yeah, that's understandable.
Right,
Megan
right,
knows a
right.
lot, but there's no way she
Uh,
can know everything, right?
Because the whole thought process was to, in the ordinance, not require it. So if you read in there, it doesn't really say that it is required, and so we never really have.
Well,
For
that's
sure.
good. That saves us money.
That
It
stage,
does,
yeah.
And it also,
Yeah.
the ordinance does provide that it goes straight to city council, so it does not go to planning. and zoning.
Okay, good.
So there's no publishing cost.
At this time, no.
If the state changes something, then we.
Or if
If we
the
change
council
it
wants
within the
to
ordinance,
make
then it could.
a requirement like the other special use permits. It is a requirement for special use permits, but not for the short-term rental special use permit, because it specifically says what's required in the ordinance, and what's required is the neighbor notification. And we do hold public hearing, but we don't publicize.
So the neighbors get notified, so there's just that.
So there's
that
just
minimum
the
cost.
postage and advertising.
And we could go the publication route in the paper as well, if y'all wanted to, but.
How many neighbors do you think we average that get notified per STR?
It's really dependent, but I could take a look at the spreadsheet and see what
Sure.
we're looking.
So we don't have a tracking process for short-term rentals. And I know I had spoken with Darren about that as well. So between the amount of time it would take the employees who are involved, because we have different employees involved at different stages, the postage to notify, and then of course, getting it to council.
We do have a lot of staff time, like you just said. I spend a lot of time on it, and Jessica spends a lot of time on it. The cost for renewal, let's say, for example, is $100. We charge, or our contracted inspector charges us $100 per inspection. So that barely covers the cost of inspection for him.
Okay. So you think the renewal should be a
I
little
think
bit
it's still
more
low.
to at least cover our expense,
But there still needs to be a benefit of the operator
right?
being able to pay a lower fee to renew, because then what's the benefit of keeping an active permit?
Right, sure.
Right now it's 350 and 100, so,
So 350 for a brand new one,
right.
100
For the
for,
brand. Yeah, it kind of depends on the property, but I have one, we sent 21 notices, 14, 11, 6. It's just within 200 feet, so it's really dependent, but
And each of those are they certified or not?
no.
Okay, so
Just
what is
regular road.
postage now?
68 cents. Okay. So Chris, you're talking about structure in terms of fees. And
Mhm.
that's, you know, in my mind, there's a separate discussion about parking.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I have no sense of parking as, you know, as what's advisable, what's a problem, what's not. I have nothing to say about.
I know, and I did some research. When I look at the IBC is
IBC.
really the International Building Code.
Okay,
Is driven by urban environments. Okay, and in an urban environment, you find the IBC, what urban environments are trying to do is get down to a parking spot. So if you build a condo in San Francisco, you're required to have one parking spot. That's it. Okay. That's a whole lot different than Alpine. Okay, and parking is the premier. That's why my view is we really want to talk about how do we take care of parking so you don't end up with all the street spots filled up for a 3 or 4 bedroom place. I think that's inappropriate to put that on a neighbor to say, well, I got 3 bedrooms, and so I'm gonna have, you know, guests that don't have 3 parking spots. That's tough for the neighbors. That's the complaint that I get. And that's why I said I go back to the IBC. I don't care where you go, you know, if they're trying to cut down, but it's not applying to the rule. So that's why I'm a believer. You got a sleeping space, you got a bedroom, you know, you gotta have a parking space for it, because people are gonna park there. And there's a number of short-term rentals where I live. Fortunately, they all have parking space. And particularly, you know, that's the challenge in Ward 5. You know, if they don't have a driveway, they ought to get a driveway.
So I
Not
have
like
a
a-
little bit- I have a little bit of experience with rentals.
Yeah.
And so, even like a hotel, something like that, you're never full.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't remember what the stats are, but they're certainly not 100 and they're certainly not 80. They're more like in the 60 range of how often you have your space filled.
You're talking about occupancy for a space.
Occupancy
Yeah.
reflects parking,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, if you have 3 rooms, you're not gonna have 3 spaces. And in a given time, it's very unlikely to have 3 spaces. So you just need to be able to pull those stats off of, from your tourism data that you have. Run that, but occupancy you'll see is,
So that's hotel occupancy. We're talking short-term rental occupancy.
it'll be the same thing, because it has to do with tourism.
No, I get that, but if someone rents out a 4-bedroom place, 4 cars are gonna show up on the weekend. That's the feedback I'm getting from people who have short-term rentals in Ward 5. You got a 4-bedroom place. I got 4 cars showing up. There's not 4 parking spaces, and that's where the complaint comes in.
I know, but you have to look a little bit into this. So if I build a 4-bedroom house.
Yeah.
Right? And I have 2 teenagers and 2 adults have each their car, you're gonna have 3 cars that tend to be there anyway. I mean, you're not, you just should think about that as being the same thing that you're imposing on the homeowner to begin with. Do you have that regulation with the home? I feel like I'm really on the spot.
sorry. They're so
You know,
small.
you have, if you build a home.
Yeah.
And you, I mean, you're surely accommodating that. There's some type of permit that should go in originally. If you're wanting to implement that. The streets are open parking. I mean, I deal with, the wonderful Fiestas down on Murphy Street all the time. They block. They park in my parking place, they park in the alley. You know, as long as they're within the law, because also you have to enforce this. And it's really difficult to enforce certain things and put that on police. Whenever you have when you're trying to implement something and get a permit, you have to think about the enforcement of it as well. Just from resident dealing with parking on time. It's so hard during those fiestas for me to get the police to move cars to get my car out. Do you know what I mean? Because they're busy. So you're gonna become very frustrated and you're going to not promote. It's not very supportive, in my opinion, of those B and Bs.
The point I'm making is I've got a short-term rental and a resident.
Mhm.
And the resident says, hey, I want to get it out of my driveway, okay? And someone's blocking, or if someone's got a 4-bedroom place and they don't have spaces for 4 cars. It's pretty frustrating for that neighbor when that street lines up. And I get it's maybe on the weekends because that's when the tourism occurs. But that's the frustration I hear from residents.
But how many parking spaces do you require? A house, when a person goes in a house.
So right now, the IBC says only 1 space, in my opinion, in Alpine, that is not sufficient.
But I'm just saying, if that is what it is, that needs to carry over to.
My position is, we on city council, this is one thing I was gonna bring up for, we had to make an amendment to the IBC that says, you got a 3-bedroom place, you got a few parking spaces. We did that, I'm perfectly comfortable.
We have nothing in our current ordinance, correct?
The
Yes.
IBC.
We do. We do, it says,
IBC.
it says IBC standards in our
Yeah.
ordinance.
But for residential right now is 1 parking spot, in residential areas, and then 1 per bedroom for the STRs.
That's correct.
And what does IBC say for
One,
residential?
and I go back to the whole discussion about urban environments. They're pushing for 1 for a residential area. And my thought is, we live in West Texas, okay, and we ought to say, hey, we already know we're short parking. So how do we begin to address that on a longer term basis? You know, so
And I'm suggesting you start with your original permit with your house.
that's fair enough. I get it. Yeah, that's right. In my view, that's why I think we had to change that. Or you get a house, you got 3 bedrooms, you have 3 parking spaces.
Because I think you're literally gonna run into some type of legal issue on that.
So what legal issue?
Well, if you enforce something, because something is a business, let's not do legal, let's talk about the perception. The perception is if you say residents need 1 parking place, but if you then rent that out, which by the way, I think that says that I love my place. I moved out, and there's a lot of reasons why people do B&Bs. And it says, I still want to contribute to the community, and it's bringing in income, and it's bringing in tourism, right? It just doesn't, it's not very promotional, and supportive.
I get that, but my view is I make it the same for STRs as it is for new builders. That's all I'm saying, make it the same. And I don't believe 1 space is enough. All the feedback I get in Ward 5, 1 space is not enough. But that's what the IBC has, and that's what council has adopted back in 2019.
I would state that with Ward 5 is very different than some of the other wards too, because that has some of the newer development where the Carpenter Association has driveways everywhere, and those are bigger houses. If we go over to the Catholic Church, you know, some of those,
Yeah,
they've had to build in driveways and everything. Couple
Would
things,
you knock down part of your house to provide a parking space if you have a historic home? So
And
you have to have some type of exception in there.
and that's just the nature of the way development's changed over time from, you know, 1800s to where we're at now. But I was gonna say on the parking thing, just a couple things. We did reach out and ask Daryl about the tickets and everything else. And he said there hadn't been, I think possibly 0 tickets. So I think it's a nuisance for the people, but it never reaches a level where it's legal because they can just park on the street and do whatever in the public right of way.
Yep.
Right there. And what else was I gonna say on that? When we did, I think he did look at it and he said if there was ever issues from STRs, it was mostly like a sound nuisance or something like that, which, you know, makes sense if you're going somewhere. I think that was, so just my viewpoint where I lean on this issue is less regulation on it, where I would say matching because it seems like we don't really have a issue from the enforcement side, from Daryl's side. I would lean towards, the 0 parking regulation or the 1. If requiring 1 does, that could make sense where you're just stating, you would think everyone would have a place for their car. But one last thing I was gonna say on that too is, when you'd mentioned 4 cars in, 4-bedroom house and 4 cars, to me, that comes back to kind of what you were saying, Chris, where if there's 4 cars coming to one house, that's 4 separate units. Because otherwise, you think people would want to talk to each other on the ride out here. So we could possibly put that into the permit fee structure of, if that is a nuisance for people as far as parking in those neighborhoods, we could fix that by a permit cost at the front end, if those were individual units.
So, there's one right down the street from me. Okay,
Taking over
it's
flat.
4 bedrooms. They bring in typically 6 vehicles. It is not unusual. They bring in 6 vehicles, plus trailers, plus motorcycles. And they fill it up. Okay, and that's where people raise the issue. This is okay. You're filling up all the bedrooms, got it. People are coming along and they're bringing their equipment. And that's the frustration people run into. So if it was just, hey, typically it's a family, you're gonna go show up, I'd agree. You're not gonna have all that many vehicles. But in today's world, people are showing up from all over and they're filling them up. And this place has 2-car garage, 2 spaces in the driveway, plus a circular driveway, and they're all filled up.
Is that the one that's has a lot of units? That's
No,
not the
it's a
one.
house at the corner of Bird and my private road. And they're a nice couple. It's not a problem. I'm just telling you, that's what shows up. Yeah. And that's where people raise the issue, particularly coming down, not Hancock, but the next one over. That's the folks who've been here talking over. That's the issue they run into. People show up, it's a 3-bedroom place, and there's a lot more.
Just feel free to jump in. You don't have to raise your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, just jump in.
I told her to get your.
It is better to approach the podium.
Yeah, that way people online can hear.
Yeah,
If
so
you
people online-
notice where the microphones are, I'm not sure that people are gonna be able to hear all the discussion, but if you wanna come closer,
Well,
so you're by the microphone, that would be great.
I'm a retired teacher. And the one thing that's a big pet peeve for us is when there's one bad classroom, we all get punished. And I think you need to be thinking that, Nate, because I live in your ward. And if there's a problem, we need to maybe address that problem with people individually before it becomes a big problem. Before you make a rule, and the more rules, the more cost to discourage people like me to even want to do this. So, why can't the people why don't you file a complaint, and there's so many complaints, and then somebody, big dog, goes over there and talks to them?
I can't, because the ordinance says a space per bedroom today. And I will tell you, this city is not enforcing the STR rules.
Okay, but this city is Alpine, Texas, and it's West Texas and not California.
It says California.
Okay, I heard you say it once.
I live here. This is my residence.
Okay.
Okay. We happen to have a daughter who lives in San Francisco. We go visit her. I know what the basis for the IBC is. That's the reason I mentioned it.
Right.
Okay, I'm just trying to help out. I know you're represented in Ward 5. The numbers of calls that I get for Ward 5 over STR issues on parking and noise. And I say, call the police. Now that we have a noise ordinance, we can work it. But they're so frustrated because they say, I call, no one's gonna respond.
I just would please keep in mind that if we can try to address this without making a more elevated fee rule that will penalize all the wards people. And I do agree with Lori. I live in Carpenter Addition, and I probably spend $500 every Halloween to feed the whole city
Me
that
too.
comes to Carpenter, and people park in front of my house. I have to get in. And I could complain about that. I could say, hey, why don't you make a grant and give us money in Carpenter Addition to pass out candy?
Yeah.
You know, it's up to us to take care of that.
It's
That's
insane.
why. I know, it's a safe neighborhood to be in, and we want to create that for the community.
So we're in violent agreement, but you were not here when I talked about philosophically where I'm at about property owners.
Right.
We're about protecting the property owners regardless of their circumstances whether they live there or they want to have as an STR. They ought to be treated fairly and equally. That's my number one premise. Okay?
Well, all the other wards giving, or is it just our ward that said?
I only represent Ward 5, and that's where I get the phone calls.
If you're in Carpenter, you're in Ward 1.
Oh, well, dang.
Well, it's okay, no, we're glad you're here. I mean,
Yeah.
Carpenter's Edition great.
Where is Ward 1?
Northeast.
That's bad, but where are they?
She's got family illness,
Oh, yeah.
so she's not here.
But I apologize.
No, it's okay.
At one time you were in my Ward 1 or not.
Well, I've always lived where we live.
Okay.
We live in, up on.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, and I'm not talking about it.
So to me, that's philosophy number two. From a permitting standpoint, we should charge more, no more for the city than what it takes for us to administer the SDR process. Okay,
Okay,
the third item is, in my view, relative to STRs. You know, having lived in places where there are parties, whether it's local residents, meaning they live there, or wherever, that's why we have the noise ordinance. That's why we put that in place, to make sure there's equity across the board, okay? I'm just trying to respond that says, hey, if we have an ordinance, we probably ought to follow it, okay? I don't want to increase any more fees, but how do we make it fair and equitable, which is what this workshop is about.
Okay,
Okay, that's all I'm trying to get after.
okay.
Good.
So I got a suggestion.
Sure.
Do I need to stand up?
Yeah, probably. That way I'm sure everybody can hear it. And then when it goes on YouTube, people will be able to hear you.
So a suggestion would be, in most things that you do that I've ever been involved with, there's feasibility studies and
Sure.
there's data.
Yeah.
And I just don't, I know you know where you live and I know you have accountability and I could sit here and say, I know where I live and so I know. So a possibility is to set up a phone number. If it's not an enforceable thing, you need a place where you could collect data. So, I mean, the perfect world, you would ask the people that are getting these permits to give that information to you, right? You could say, on average, how many cars park at that, but it puts another burden on that person. But more or less, you could just see if it's a problem. If you have a problem in your neighborhood with parking and not being able to park on the street, call this number. Give the address of where that's happening and the time and the date, and begin collecting and say there's 5 vehicles plus 2 trailers on this street on this day at this time, so you can actually collect data. Because you may find that all the wards are not reflecting the same problem. And that way you actually have real data coming in, so you can make a correct decision on it.
Good comment, yeah.
Yeah.
Very
It's
good.
always good.
Uh-huh. Science background there.
Yeah, I would just be happy if we enforced our current ordinance. That's kind of where I'm coming from, and gather the data based upon that. I mean, we have an ordinance that's in place. I have pushed back on people who've applied for short-term permits when they don't comply with it. And I said, no, in Ward 5. Every application that comes in, where someone fills out and we get, I don't know, how many pages, 10, 15 pages for each STR application. And I personally drive by and look. And my frustration right now is we're not enforcing what we have in our current ordinance. If we like it, we ought to change it. And that's what I thought this workshop was about.
So which part of the ordinance do you find is the most violated or not enforced?
So the one that the one that's not enforced?
Parking?
No, we have people who are operating short-term rentals that have not filed for a permit because we've denied them. And we have taken no action.
So we have been citing short-term rentals.
There are 2
Whether,
properties in my ward that I know there's one over in Ward 3 that are operating as short-term rentals and they don't have permits. And they've come to this council and we've said no, and they've advertised them anyway, and they started advertising before they actually came forward. And we didn't approve them.
Do they know the address so that Megan and Gio
We
and,
pull the addresses up, that's easy. We disapproved them as council. We had this discussion. We said, no, they're not compliant.
And so I know part of the discussion is that while they're going through the application process, we haven't been citing them.
And we denied
Okay.
them and they continue to rent.
were y'all aware of that, Megan? Did they continue?
I think the one, I know for sure one of them, I don't know if they were continuing to rent, is the parking issue. They didn't meet the minimum standards
They
for
didn't,
the
yeah.
parking.
There's 3 that have been postponed, and this is the whole reason we're going through this process, to try to figure out what's gonna happen with those 3. And
Okay,
I think all of them work for parking, if I'm not mistaken.
They work.
all 3.
all right.
How
Derek,
many
you
do
want
we
to
have
say-
in the city that are permitted?
We have about 75.
75?
Mhm.
Well, there's many more than that, obviously.
that
There are
was a-
some that, haven't been permitted, and we try to follow the site.
Yeah, I know y'all been trying to find them, the ones that are advertising on the major
Yeah.
Sites to
Yeah.
see if they do have permits. I know you've been working on that.
Thank you.
And then Darren, you were gonna,
I was gonna say just one thing, because I agree with Mr. Stevens, but in a different light on it as far as the cost. The permit cost should be to administer the SDR process. I agree 100% on that. But I think that's a very variable process, because we're running a bare bones system now, where we issue them a permit, we roll and everything else. You guys don't have like software support or anything else as far as time. That STR permitting process could be very limited and bare bones, and we can do it for, pennies on the dollar, or we can have a fancier system and raise those permit costs to increase compliance. And when I was kind of just looking at it right here before the meeting, I was like, what does that entail? Because Mr. Stevens had said the same thing. These places will come in, they'll fix up the property, so the property tax goes up. They come in, they spend sales tax. I agree with all that as well. But that money goes into the general fund to me, which would go towards policing, fire, everything else to kind of protect it. So the permit costs to me are earmarked directly towards the process of permitting, inspections, compliance, enforcement, and remittance of the for STRs. So that permit fee, and if we can do that for $350 a year or $100 for a renewal, which I'd say we can't, then even coming back and looking at it, because it's in our budget year over year, I think we've gone from 7,500 or maybe 5,700 2 years ago, or when you guys started really nailing down the STRs and finding out where they were. And in our last budget was around 9,600 maybe is what we expected to receive from permit fees. So the city's basically saying for a little under $10,000, we can manage the entire permitting process for 75.
75 homes. We have an online hand up, Gia.
You can call
Okay, all right. Derek,
Hi, I'm Derek Mathis. I have 2 short-term rental properties in Alpine. I just wanted to express some concerns about raising, fees and costs for the permitting process. When you have 2, it hits pretty close to home. And the problem is in Alpine, we're reaching a level of saturation. And because of that, profits are considerably down. I shared with Mr. Nance some of the costs that we incur on an annual basis. And unless you're in the business, I'm not sure that people fully realize and appreciate just how expensive it is. And I was very transparent, and I disclosed exact sums, of some of the expenditures. And so I want to just, caution you against being, please don't look at fees as a profit center. And I agree that this should cost no more than the actual cost to the city. And apparently we don't have a good handle at this point on what that cost is. It makes sense to me that the initial application fee is going to involve a whole lot more administration. So that would seem to make sense to me that you might have an initial application fee that was considerably higher than the renewal fee. The renewal itself, one thing you could look at is doing something along the lines of every other year renewing, raising that fee to 150 and going at it like that. That would reduce your costs, but increase your fee at the same time to cover some costs. To me, it's unlikely that a short-term rental owner is going to fall out of compliance in the course of a year. The saturation drives competition, and the competition drives compliance. I'm continually having to be more creative and make more and more improvements to my properties in order to get bookings. I honestly have one property that's profitable, one that's not. I'm not in this to make a big profit. I mean, that's just a pipe dream, but I do it because I love it, because I love doing business in Alpine. So those are some of the things I just wanted to raise and say, give that some thought and consideration, if you would. Thank you.
Hey, Derek, Rick Stevens, would you see value in basing the fee not on a flat rate, but more, because you can consider your costs? I know I've seen STRs, the prices are like from $50 up to, $150. Would you see a sliding scale that's based upon what you rent it for as an appropriate way to do it? Or do you think flat fee makes sense?
I think flat fee makes sense because administering that would seem to be a bit of an administrative nightmare. I think I don't know how that would be implemented. And it would seem to me to be very difficult to do that. But so I'm more of a proponent of the flat fee. I mean, for me, I have a 1 2-bedroom and 1 3-bedroom, and frankly, for me, the time I spend on each is pretty equal. So that's my reasoning for that.
Okay, thanks.
And Derek, I was just gonna say too, thank you for sharing the information you did there. I did a little research on Airbnb today when I had some time, and saw that as a percentage of the total cost, when people are renting these, Airbnb typically takes around 12%, and cleaning fees were anywhere from 10 to 20%. So I mean, a quarter of the stay for anyone that's coming to an Airbnb is immediately taken up by the cleaners and the Airbnb. So a lot of people have their hands in y'all's pockets. I understand, and where the city's at as well. But you guys are kind of balancing a lot of these costs, and you don't have control over all of them. So I can see it's that's a factor you guys have to take into account.
And then you lump in property taxes and insurance and even groundskeeping and so many other items that go into it, that it's an expensive business to be in.
Thank you, Derek. That was great.
You're welcome.
So, trying to move the ball along. So one of my motivations is I just wish we'd work the compliance. How do we go work to follow up on the compliance? I'd almost like to hear from those who are not compliant. Not that I'm trying to get after them, it's why are you pushing back, and then how do you make that go? And I don't know how to go work that, but I'd love to have the conversation with those who are renting out, not compliant. What's it take to resolve it? Because that might be a way to sort through. I don't know.
Give you some feedback on that.
Okay.
So I happen to know a lot of people just from my old contacts working with Big Ben Holiday Hotel.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of B&Bs that went into place down in Terlingua. And so I was encouraging people to be compliant.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of feedback. So they don't want someone to tell them, they feel like they're going to be limited and their rights are going to be taken away, that someone's going to try to regulate them. And all they're trying to do is to make their payment on their property, and they're trying to keep their head above water. At the beginning, whenever you start a B&B, people give me facts on how much they spend, for down there was like water and things that go wrong. And I mean, the list was really, really, really long. I was surprised because I don't have those, issues. You don't think about those if you live in Alpine, Texas. But the biggest thing, they also don't, I guess people are a little resistant for you. They think permit, they think regulation. So I think that's part of, they think that today you start with this permit, and tomorrow you start with some other type of thing that you put upon us that's more and more regulation, like parking, for example.
So you think that's why we have non-compliance?
Right, because they don't want to have to, they think you're going to just keep imposing more and more rules, and that they're going to have to keep compliant because now you have their name on a list and you're now inspecting them. And they also feel like if they're in a
place that has water catchment or arrangements are a little different, you know, in some parts of Brewster County, those costs are different than what they would be, like they have to take care of their trash, for example. There's just different costs and stuff. So they're resistant is they're terrified of you putting them out of business, basically, or not making it profitable for them to do it because of all the new rules they think you're going to impose upon them.
So how do you balance, that's a great conference. How do you balance people who say, I have a house here, I want to live here, an STR next door. And in my view, that's what we're trying to balance, how to go work that. In the end, anyone who comes to Alpine is bringing dollars to Alpine. We get sales tax, we get property tax. It's what I call all goodness, and they go visit the area. In ultimately, cities would rather not have any regulations or any laws.
Mhm.
It's like I was over at Sul Ross, I came down to come to this meeting here, and a guy was going down Avenue B at 55 miles an hour. I clocked him. He hit the corner on Loop Road, didn't even stop, just slow down. And I gave up trying to follow him. So can't do it. Okay? The points you raised earlier, our challenge is not most people, because most people want to live in a court and be good neighbors.
Mhm.
It's the violators we're struggling with. And so to me, that's where we're trying to come up with. It's not about how do you regulate, control everything else, but struggling, how do you break that barrier? It said when you've got someone who says, hold on, I just want to live in my house. And I got people who are coming on the weekend, the lights go on, just not used to that, because on the other side of the neighborhood, we don't have that problem and the parking fills up. That's the struggle we're trying to work our way through.
I think that they don't see the benefit.
I want to live in quiet Alpine. That's not the
I
benefit of the
mean,
noise.
you're asking for
Yeah, I
feedback.
know, I'll give you a little.
So
bit.
you literally have to figure out, you know, I'm a member of Big Bend Art Council and they charge an amount to be a member. So I always ask, what benefit do I get by being a member?
Question.
So I think if it's clearer and there are clear benefits, people will become more compliant because they will see the benefit in it. But I don't have the answer for you. I just have some thoughts that would make them more encouraging to do something if they actually thought there was a way that it benefited them.
Okay.
And I do think that whenever you're thinking about this, that would help if you just, if you think of these places being profitable, you literally need to notch it down to half. Whatever you think they're making half of that.
Oh, yeah. There's no
If
question.
they're doing really, really good.
Yeah.
So you have, this is not a high profitable, you know, business.
I'm surprised anyone has STRs because my expectations are making zip.
Yeah,
And they're lucky to pay their payment.
Yeah.
I'm curious why STRs over a long-term rental? Why? Anybody have any idea? Come on. Come to the microphone though.
People that want to hold on to a house, it's been in the family for a while. They don't want to lock it down for 6 months because they want the ability for friends and relatives to come in.
I see.
And so for me, not only did I lose my in-laws in one wreck 8 years ago, I lost my husband last year. And I'm trying to float a house. And I thought about doing this, but I'm so discouraged that I don't want to even start the process. And I'm sorry, I'm getting upset about it. But you know, I don't want to get rid of this house.
Right.
And it's furnished and I'd love to just let people stay there. Like I do have friends that stay there and maybe somebody might go and give me some electricity money.
Uh-huh.
But I would like to pay for the taxes and things that I can't afford to.
Right. And so
And
you don't want to
so,
lock it down
I
to
don't
somebody who has a year.
Lock it down for a month, but intermittently. And then one of the other things is when you do Airbnb and you're intermittent, like me, you get hit hard on your whatever they graduate. So for the few of us who have moved here and lived here, want to stay here, want to keep a home here, I would like to see a local discount. I'm not from California. I don't buy this house up and, have this random amount of money left over.
So the point you're raising is a really good one, and I would tell you, we don't have any insight about the business model. Okay? And that's one of the things, the business model. Okay, the cost, and Derek shared some information with Darren, which I think is terrific. Would it be possible for us to sit down and get educated about the business model you're facing? I mean,
I'm here to get educated because I would like to start this process.
yeah,
And right now, I've had to take a loan.
you don't know, I get that, and so part of when I look at a business, there's value to the city from property tax, from sales tax, and all the things that occur. That's why I say I'm a believer in OPM, other people's money. Bring it in.
Yeah.
Help us do the things we want to do. You're an example, Derek's an example. Frankly, I don't think this council has seen what that model looks like in terms of what it takes to go run it. Okay? And without data, it's really hard for us to make some decisions about what makes sense. On one side, we can go spend time to really understand the cost of maintenance and administration, all that. Right now, we got a fee of $350 and $100. Okay. Darren's pointed out, probably not enough. Okay. So you'd almost say, geez, at $500, whatever that number is, you all have to pay and figure out whether that makes business sense or not. Okay.
Sure.
And, but we have no data. I just gotta tell you, I've not seen any data at all about Airbnb business in Alpine. We know we got about 75 units. Okay, there are probably more operating without permits. They're under the radar. Okay, it's part of the reason we approved last night in city council, Teravano operating her 1-seat beauty salon. She's over there. She's got a great place. We said, let's make a variation because people are trying to run businesses and survive. And we got to help regulate it, not to control, but to provide balance and equity across. Now, I, for one, would love to be able to sit down and spend a couple hours to understand what does it really take to make that go. And then we can make some informed decisions. Because right now, I think we're flying in the absence data. So the data marker I've got is the calls I get on parking. That's a concern. Okay. I think the noise issue is resolved. I don't think we have enough information to make a determination.
Derek has his hand up too, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
Oh, I
Thank
think
you,
you
Doc.
can't compare us to Marfa because that's a whole
I don't
different.
care about Martha, I care about Alpine.
But that impacts us in some ways that we can't compete with them and have the same rules either.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so if you're willing, I mean,
Personally, for me, when I drive around, I see a lot of STR fail.
I don't know.
Because they're not making enough money to make it.
Well, I've talked to a number of owners who said, I'm selling because I can't make a buck.
Like literally, you have local people trying to make it.
Yeah.
And then we need to go, Derek, is that his hand?
Literally, you have local people trying to make it work, and when it doesn't, they're gonna sell it, and then they will sell it to a high bidder, which is gonna be someone that moves here.
You
Someone,
mean like gentrification? is what you're-
Well, I mean,
Price values go.
that, people need homes. Look at all the people who've been displaced
oh,
by
yeah,
storms, and they will come, but the people. That was a great example because I know a lot of people who have this little property, they're trying to hang on to it.
Yeah.
And this is the way they're gonna hang on to it.
yeah.
And if they can't, they're gonna sell it.
All right, Derek,
Just a quick comment on the fees. There's often a saying that, oh, it's okay to raise, the cost to these short-term rental operators because they just pass it on to their customers. Well, that day has come and gone. In fact, Mr. Nance is aware that I think that the visitors office there has a report saying that we're at saturation. So it is not that simple. In fact, I've had the benefit of hindsight here, having done this for several years, and I've watched my rates have to be decreased significantly from just where we were at, 2 years ago. And so it is no longer of, oh, well, if I get an increase, I just pass that on to the customer, because we can't do that because there's so much competition, and including the competition that there's non-compliant and is not under permit. So they're not only do they not have a permit, they're probably not paying their hotel occupancy taxes. So automatically they get a 13% discount on what they can charge to a customer between your state and local hotel occupancy taxes. So it just wanted to address that. It's just not that simple to say, okay, well, whatever we decide, if it costs the STR operator more, they'll pass that on to the customer, because it's just not reality. And that's it.
Thank you, Derek.
So,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say two things kind of to keep it rolling as well. I think from the permit fee side, the city needs to ask, and this may be a thing that Derek could speak into, or any other SDR owners, what we as a city want from the permit process, like how onerous is it right now for the city to go through this? What's our enforcement, what's our compliance, what's our remittance? We need to look at what we want from as a city from that, what that's gonna cost. And if there's any way that we can work with the SDR owners, like if they can get anything from a value add on their end. Like, I don't know if there is anything like where if you're doing HTR, if you have to come down and bring a check to the city, or if you could just do it online. Other things like that can make it easier on the SDR owners end as well, so that they're actually getting something from that increased permit fee if it increases.
What if we didn't charge any permit?
Did you clear Derek's hand, or is it up again?
No, I didn't clear it.
Okay.
Well, yeah, what if we didn't charge permit? So think about this is why I go back to the business model. The business model we've got for us as a city is we have two sorts of funds. We have the general fund and we have the enterprise funds. Okay, the general fund brings in property tax and sales tax. Okay, and we provide police and all sorts of things that go along the streets and all things that go along with that. People coming into Alpine, and this is part of the discussion we're going through with the Alpine Business Alliance, is trying to understand how much people are spending when they come to visit Alpine. My sense is people coming to visit Alpine are going to restaurants, sales tax, okay? They're buying things, sales tax. They're helping property owners, property tax. You'd almost say, take the deterrent away. Don't charge any fee. $350, so at $10,000, our budget is $16.8 million. $10,000 gets lost in the shuffle because I think we could convince ourselves that we make a hell of a lot more in sales tax than we're ever going to make in permit fees. And you just flip the equation around.
The one thing I was gonna say on that real quick is, talking to Mr. Ruja, we had there's a chart about supply and demand has gone up, but supply has gone up a lot quicker. So I think that's why we're seeing market saturation, and that's partially, I think, because our fee structure is so low. And it's for a year. Somebody can come in and say, $350, I'll give it a shot. We'll see if it works. And then if it doesn't, we could either do that 2-year process to make it a higher barrier to entry in order to get into the SDR market, or a 2-year item. And one thing just to talk about Megan's budget, I've looked at other city budgets. They always just say, here's the permit fees, and it's one line. She actually breaks it into the individual properties so we can actually see. So I was kind of wondering if they stay active, if they have a 1-year permit, as long as they have a permit that is active, if they are on that budget. But I guess they would, even if they had an inactive one, it would have to remain on the budget because that's for the entire year, fiscal year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you look at the budget, the reason why we have so many SDRs with a 0 is because they become inactive. But it's also really good information for the public and for the council to see is you can start seeing the rotation of SDRs. You'll start seeing, because we don't put them in by like, Megan Amtram's SDRs. No, it's I have this unit, I have this unit, I have this unit. You see all 3 of them. So over time, you start to see how they rotate and how all of a sudden we'll have 100 and next year we'll have 75. Year after year, we start to take them off. But that doesn't mean at any given point that, it's because I decided to travel abroad for a year because I'm retired and I have that luxury and I'm gonna come back and start my business back up. And then we still have them available to reactivate, but it's really just for visualization of what they're bringing in. It also is the friendly reminder to me is who's not in compliance. So when I see zeros, when there should be a number, it's the trigger for me to send out the letter that says you haven't paid your taxes.
Lori?
The feedback, because I asked that question with the people that I got that information for.
Yeah.
100% of them said they would be more compliant with taxes if they didn't have to deal with the permit.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's kind of my sense. And that's why I go back to this notion that says, Elaine and I are blessed. We have a number of properties, okay? If I were to go take one of my properties and say I want to turn it into a short-term rental, okay? It is not an inexpensive proposition to go do, okay? So because when we go and do the inspection, we have a number of compliance requirements. I gotta go meet all those needs. I'm gonna spend money, so I gotta invest money to take one of my properties to get into a short-term rental. And then the point is right over there, I gotta clean it. I gotta do all the other things that go associated with it. I'm gonna lose whatever my percentage is because of the hotel occupancy tax, okay? I find, for me, I'd rather rent out on the long term because I know I can count on that renter. I know it's gonna work my way through. And so I truly believe STRs spend more and get less out of the return. And I think that's part of the equation we don't understand. And without understanding that, I don't know how we can make an informed decision on what makes sense. My view is market saturation is driven by people looking and saying, I think I can go work, and then they roll out of it because they didn't make a buck out of it. And they said, I'm not gonna do that anymore. And then they sell the house or whatever. That's not something the permits are gonna drive. The permits will have, in my opinion, have no impact on whether people go on STRs or not.
So I just want clarification. Are you talking about permits in general, or are you talking about the fees associated with the permit?
I'm talking about STR fees, whatever, the $350. I think filling out a form so we know, because we'd like to have that form so we can make sure hotel occupancy tax fees are being paid. We'd like to be able to have that. It's a way to be able to go verify someone's paying their taxes. Because in my mind, pay your taxes, that's part of what we gotta go do, but paying $350, no, I do a permit, no fee. Here's the rules, no fee, go after it. And people say, oh, okay, I got it.
I find it interesting how Mr. Stevens and I are very different in this, where I'm more, don't regulate the parking, and then you're more into regulating the parking. But then you're more open to, the more open on permit fees, and then I'm more into raising permit fees. We're kind of like two separate sides of the coin on disparate issues here.
But the issue with parking is the neighbors. Okay, that's the only issue I have. If it weren't for the neighbors calling and saying, my God, they got 4 cars showing up, they blocked my driveway or whatever. I went over and talked to them, can you move it? Yeah, we moved it. Okay, that's the only issue I got. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't care about parking. I really wouldn't.
That's the same thing on that house that we denied for, because that's in my ward. I went and walked by it, and that's on Del Rio, and it's just too convenient to park on the street as opposed to cutting through the alley. I would say no. I would say most of those garages are probably used for storage.
Oh,
because
they
they're
are.
too easy to just park in the front.
Yeah.
So it's a design issue.
So then the question to ask is, if that was an owned property and they had 4 vehicles and it wasn't an STR, would you still enforce it the same way?
Right now, the regulations we have say no. Okay, I'm a believer. We've never not had this discussion. I think the IBC is inadequate when you talk about a rural area like Alpine, and we don't have enough parking for people. And you can't fix what's already done. But for houses going forward, if we issue a building permit, I'd say, hey, I'd at least have a 2-car garage as a minimum and space for 2 more cars in a driveway.
And I think the enforcement is really hard. Not every officer that we have is gonna know that that's an STR property and there's 5 vehicles and there should only be 2. So enforcing it isn't realistic. Cause you could drive by my own property and see that there's 6 vehicles and think, oh, they're having a wild party. There's all these people and they shouldn't be, but it's not an STR.
Megan, part of it gets down to, there's a lot, people are really smart about what goes on in this town. I mean, but that's I'm always amazed people are bright, and you gotta give them credit for that. And if there's a nuisance and they're not compliant, they're gonna report it. They just wanna make sure that if it gets reported, something's gonna happen. If they're not compliant and they report it, nothing happens, they say, well, I'm not gonna call. Doesn't make sense.
And they, like that cutting, you know, when you had mentioned covering the driveway.
Yeah.
That is illegal.
Yeah.
So that I mean, the cops would totally be called on that one.
Yeah.
So when we hear that there's been no cases that have been elevated up to the cops for them to ticket or anything, then I think it's kind of like what you're saying, where it's handled by the people. Come, you're blocking my driveway, move.
Yeah. Yeah.
And stuff.
Ideally, that's where we'd like to be.
Good neighbors.
Yeah, we'd like to have good neighbors.
Fences make good neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of going for no fee. Now, but still have the permit.
Would it still require all the compliance, follow-up and
course.
everything? But no fee,
No
no
fee.
cover the cost.
Yeah. And I'm serious. Lady who left, I'd like, she lives in Ward 1. I'd like to know who she is.
Does anybody know who she is?
Kim.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it was Kim? Oh, okay.
What's your
okay.
last name?
I didn't even recognize
Okay,
her.
I'd like to give Kim a call. I'll just say, hey, Kim, or you want to sit down and have a conversation? Okay, what's your model look like? Here's a woman who expressed right in front of us. She's got a house. She's had some challenges in her life. She wants all in the house. She wants to use STR. What does it take to make that viable for her? The answer may be, it doesn't happen because it's not a viable business model. That's been my experience with so many businesses in Alpine. What's the biggest issue we have with business in Alpine? Completely undercapitalized. Completely undercapitalized. They don't have enough money to float beyond but a few months. They think they're gonna start, they think they're gonna make profit in the first month, and they eke their way through to about month 6 and finally said, I'm out of here.
There's no demand.
No demand, that's one item, and or they didn't have enough capital to float for a year. Okay, that's a tough business decision to make. Short-term rentals are no different. Okay, and starting small is another way to work it. So if there's an opportunity for Kim to hold on to her house and we can learn from it, there's probably some sense to do that.
I'm gonna just mention I think Megan had said Marfa has more STRs than we have.
Yes.
And with a much higher fee and everything else like that. So I think when we look at those fees and everything else like that, a lot of this is just demand side, you know? I mean, Terlingua booming. People want to go down and see Big Ben. People want to go to Marfa and go see the art and stuff like that. I think we as a city need to give them a couple more reasons to come in and just stay here and everything else. Like, as I said, we are the hub of the Big Ben, center of the Big Ben, you know? But even being the hub, if you're one of the spokes, it's a 30-minute drive. So that convenience factor does tie in when you choose where you stay.
Good point there.
Yeah, to that end, there's a question in my mind is because the hardest data that we have right now is from AirDNA, which is bringing VRBO and Airbnb information. So short-term rental information. We don't have as much hard info about hotels, but I'm actually working that piece right now. I can't get month to month, but I can get the last 8 years month to month. But I suspect that we're actually seeing kind of society-wide a shift back to hotels, which is maybe exacerbating that demand supply issue. But like one thing that I want Kim to keep her house for sure. I adore Kim. But I would want to show her that chart because I don't want her to invest her heart and her capital and onto something that's going to be such a hard slog if we've already got. You know, I'm proud of the upward trend of booked nights.
Yeah.
But it does concern me for every business owner when I see how many more available rooms, because see that other trend line of growing faster, the supply growing so much faster than our demand.
And even tying into that, when we look at the HOT monies and all that kind of stuff, you take the first 5 hotels, Hampton, Holiday Inn, Quarter Circle, Sunday House, and I think that's 400 to 450,000 of the 700
Yes.
that comes in. So I mean, those 5 hotels are the big players in bringing in revenue.
Well, and you talk about Marfa, you know, we can't compare ourselves to Marfa. The economy is completely different in Marfa. I mean, completely different. I built houses in Marfa. Okay, you get a lot more money building a house in Marfa than you ever will in Alpine. Okay, because it's a different market in terms of what's going on. And when you understand that, you go where the money is, okay? And to the point, people can't charge as much here to be able to have a successful Airbnb or STR.
I think that's what Holland's gonna be chasing, though, on their redesign. I think they're
Yeah.
chasing the high-end consumer, which is hopefully brings in some of that.
That's really, otherwise it wouldn't make the investment. So. What if we floated, no fee?
I would like to know what the other council, and you have to say
Yeah,
that.
I agree.
I'm pro fee.
I just also want to remind council, no matter if you have a fee or not have a fee, there's an issue of sustainability. So our budget is not just property taxes and sales taxes, it is all of our fees as well. They may not make up a significant impact of the budget, but over time, when you look at property taxes and sales taxes, we have to be prepared for the hikes and the lows as well.
Yeah, no, Megan, I'm a believer of, fees, I really am. You're gonna, you got sewer, you got water, you got gas, you got all those things you gotta put in, particularly when you're making modifications. You know, I commented, we had the water breakage a couple weekends ago, you know, I told us, you're gonna pay for a new water meter, just get over it. They said, okay, fine, because they broke it. Okay, and my reaction is, you gotta pay for that new water meter. Those are the sorts of things. I'm just, my thinking relative to STRs is because of the amount of money they're bringing in, the benefit ratio is so much higher, and we'll get more people wanting to say, oh, now to be compliant, so I gotta meet all the requirements, so I don't have to pay the fee. I think we're gonna make more than $350 in the first year someone rents out the STR, given what we're gonna get in the hot funds. And to me, that's the value proposition of sales tax. So.
I don't know, I have to think about it, because there are a lot of STRs. And we know that they're not full all the time, that the market's saturated. I would like to know how much money they do bring in. Are they bringing in as much money as we think they are, if they're sitting there empty? But yet we have these administrative costs. So right now, I'm still of the opinion that we at least need to cover the cost of the city. What it takes for us to have somebody with an STR here. Otherwise, it's just money we're throwing away that could be used. It's not that we're making a profit. I don't say that we should make a profit on it, but we need to cover our own costs, because there are so many other things as well that the city needs: water, wastewater, roads, employee benefits, employee packages. There's a lot that the city needs. And then also we debate on quality of life in Alpine and who we're going to donate to, whether we donate to the library, to the Sunshine House, to the Family Crisis Center. So this is money that could also go to those causes. So I have to think about it before I can give you an opinion on whether I think fee or no fee. Because even though it's only $10,000, that could be $10,000 that goes to the Family Crisis Center, or goes to the Sunshine House, or goes to the library. And that affects a lot of the residents of the city of Alpine.
Okay, so Kathy, you bring up a really good point back to Darren's. If we said all of our STR fees are going to a charitable fund, I guarantee you people look and say, this is a whole different story. Okay, my STR fees are actually not going to the city coffers, but they're going to a charitable organization.
I'm not saying they have to go to a charitable organization. I'm just giving examples of the way.
No, but basically, that's a good option.
Yeah.
Is that fee, it establishes the fund you guys want to have to be able to give to charitable donations.
So you're saying that if we're
Without
gonna have
affecting-
fees, maybe we should do it that way?
Yeah.
Because we didn't donate to the Sunshine House this year, yet it provides a tremendous service to our community,
And I took
to our
out
residents.
took it out of my discretionary.
Yeah.
But-
So. I don't know. Okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be an option. Okay, you pay these STR fees, and what city council's gonna do is dedicate it to.
It's my view. It's just not a whole lot different than Martin Benovich every week. That's just the trading post. It
Right.
says, hey, we're raising X amount of money this month. It's gonna go to whatever.
Right.
Another thing you might consider, again, they're gonna say, how do I benefit from this? They will feel much better about that fee. There's no question about that. But they're always gonna ask what they benefit from. So if you had a portion of that that went to promote, if there was a page that actually promoted those things that are compliant,
Well, there you go.
so, you know, then they're going, oh, I get advertising. Now, you may have something that is on a website, right? But I'm talking about a different type of advertisement, not one that's connected just to the city, you know, like a more tourist oriented PR. They
To
will feel,
visit
they will,
Alpine.
they'll feel extraordinary, you know, extraordinary. So, you know, you push on your campaign and you have a list there. They will feel better about that as well, because I do not think they feel like, they think they're being penalized.
Yeah.
And the question also that came up, which I didn't mention, because I don't even know if this actually happens, but they were like, do the hotels pay for permit and renewal for every room that they have every year? That was, they asked me that question. I'm like, I don't know, call someone who knows.
Megan.
Hotels
would
are
know.
in commercial areas and STRs are in residential areas.
But
Okay,
they
so-
do have to pay permits for construction and stuff like that.
Okay,
She's asking with the, if STRs have to pay a permit. And then every year or whatever we decide, 2 years or whatever it is, they pay a renewal fee. Is there something similar for a hotel? They have to pay building permits and things like that, but so do the homes.
But so do
when
the
they're built.
homes. That's one of
So-
the things that have came up in a discussion. So
So do
That's
they,
the difference.
what do hotels pay?
they pay hot tax and then
That's-
they pay all of their normal fees like everyone else.
So the other thing that most are not aware of, their property tax is not based upon hotel valuation. Like a house, you know, a house $100,000 we pay, theirs is based upon revenue. So they pay a much higher percentage of property tax. than
Because
most
it's commercial.
Any idea, because it's. commercial.
Okay.
So
And
a
it's
lot-
based upon.
that's a good thing I can communicate.
Yeah.
That's
A
right.
lot
Now,
of
you
people
have
know.
increased water fees because they're commercial, correct?
No.
No? Okay.
It's just a flat usage.
Okay.
The commercial, well, because of the type of business they are, their property taxes are based off the revenues, and we have more hotels that are our top 10 taxpayers
Yeah.
than anything else.
Yeah.
But what they're wanting is they're wanting something from it, and what they're really asking, I believe, my interpretation is they're looking to fill those rooms more. Because the more they fill their rooms, the more money they can make and the more they can afford those type of fees. Because that's the bottom line struggle.
Yeah.
When we talk about fees too, I was just gonna mention, it reminds me of when you pay an employee. You can control how much you pay an employee, but you can't control how they spend it. And someone could say, I'm not making enough money. Well, we're paying you a set amount. I can't control how you spend it, you know, ex facto, post facto. But it's kind of the same thing when we look at short-term rentals. We can control the fees to cover our own cost. We can't control what the interest rate was when you bought this home, the business idea you thought you had, your landscaping cost, your cleaning cost. You know, there's a lot of factors that we can't control on the business end. We can only control the factors that we control.
So did y'all want to move forward with us writing something up, removing the fees, changing the parking, making any changes to the ordinance and having it proposed, or?
If we were gonna do any changes, I would really like to have some of the other council members here for something like that. The one I think that we're all probably on board with, because I agree with Mr. Stevens on this dramatically, is compliance. How do we move forward on compliance? I think that's a one
So-
we're all shaking our heads on.
I would like to send y'all San Antonio's. They have more teeth in their compliance than we do. They not only go over the steps of being non-compliant, how to become compliant, but
Oh,
they
thank you.
also go over the criminal, civil charges and what can be done with that as well. So they actually kind of have it a little bit more tiered. I think that would benefit us.
Derek,
Just a quick comment on fees. So I've heard a proposal for no fees. I've heard a proposal for where our fees need to meet our costs. But I haven't heard anybody say, what are some ways we could, reduce our costs and thereby reduce our fees? And one thing that I mentioned specifically is the annual inspection. And this would be great to run by, Jessica or somebody like that and say, hey, what do we gain from that? Is this something that needs to be done absolutely every year? I mean, because again, for me, it's incredibly disruptive to guests. And it's also, something that's going to causes your fees to increase considerably. I believe I heard somebody say you have to outsource that to an independent and pay them $100. I may be wrong about that, but I thought that's what I heard. So that's just one area where maybe just the renewal piece of it, some of that administration cost could come down by looking at that. And again, I've been subject to these annual inspections for a few years now. And, it's just not that involved. I mean, if the batteries go dead in your smoke detector, guess what? Your guest's going to let you know about it and you're going to fix it, because bad reviews equal bad revenues. So it just, again, it's almost a self-regulating thing. I understand you'll have some bad apples, but by and large, most of us who operate, the nicer, the higher end facilities, I just don't see that being an issue. So maybe that's an area. So maybe come at it like that, looking at that. Well, maybe we can do both. Maybe we can cover our costs, but maybe we also cover our costs, and in the process, reduce some of the administration costs and thereby reduce the fees to short-term rental operators.
Well, why do we inspect anything?
Thank you, Derek. That was a great comment. Is
Why
there
do we
anything
inspect?
required by law? I can see the initial inspection to make sure they have fire extinguishers and this and that, but is there anything required by?
It's a health and safety, so we do inspect other businesses and residents for health and safety. I know, like I said, looking at San Antonio's, they specifically outline their inspections, inspections upon compliant or suspicion of violation. The city may perform inspections when a violation is reported or suspected in accordance with the established code enforcement procedures. So it's not required. Their permits are also 3 years, not 1 year. It is a health and safety.
But doesn't, like Derek said, it can be done every 3 years? He doesn't have to have a inspector.
Correct. So we put it in specifically like that within our ordinance, because at the time this was being put together, it was a concern over someone renting the space. A fire breaks out, something goes wrong. But we put it in there. There's no reason why we can't reduce the number of inspections, change the timing if a complaint's filed.
He has a good point. We could raise the fee to where it covers the city's cost, but yet it's reduced for the homeowner if we're not inspecting every year. That makes sense overall, over a time frame of say 3 years. So we're still covering our costs, but we're reducing the number of inspections required.
I'm just under the purview that says, I don't think, so we certainly have health and safety requirements up front. But beyond that, my reaction is the city doesn't have any liability. We inspected, I guarantee you, you can take any one of our houses and send an inspector through there and there's gonna be a violation. Guaranteed, no question about it.
No
Okay.
way, not my house.
Guaranteed, okay? And so the point I'm raising is, if we verify a short-term rental, first time up, got all their stuff, unless there's complaint, I'd say, let it be. Because we don't have the liability, the homeowner does.
That's a good point.
Okay, if I'm a homeowner, I gotta have, if I rent property, if I'm a renter, I gotta have insurance. Things burns down, it's my fault.
That's a good point.
So I'm kind of where, do it once, be done with it.
So we could cover our costs, but reduce costs for the short-term rental owner overall by,
Well, they don't pay for the inspection. They don't cut a check to them.
Yeah, we inspect.
right, but it's costs us money, correct?
Right
Yeah,
now,
it
it's
costs us
costing
money.
the exact
So
same.
that's what I'm saying. The fee should cover the city's cost. Whatever the city's having to spend. But yet we could reduce that cost if we take away the requirement to have all these inspections year over year.
On the renewal side.
Yes,
year-over-year.
yeah.
But at that point, would it be even necessary to have a quote unquote renewal or just have an unexpired permit unless it's revoked?
Probably unexpired permit
Yeah.
unless it's revoked.
Yeah.
Yeah, why take the manpower on the homeowner's part and the city's part to have somebody come in and have to fill out the form and then the form has to be filed or electronically scanned or whatever, just unexpired permit.
Derek, what do you think?
Sounds plausible to me. I like it.
Well, it was Derek's idea. I think it was very good.
Thank you.
So then you would also have to take into consideration if you're look at things like that is our current ordinance allows for the permit to be transferred to an heir of the property, but not at the sale of the property. So you'd want to make sure that we include, if you're doing an unexpired permit, are you basing it on just the individual who has the permit? Or are you doing it on the site in which they have the permit?
I do it on the individual. Someone's gonna buy a new house, buy property, they're gonna do whatever they're gonna do with it. You wanna get them back to the process.
I think she was saying heir. So for
It
example,
does
if
say
I,
that right now.
yeah, if I had.
So
a
if this
house-
person was, if we change the ordinance, it would just be for that person, so it doesn't matter what, it would basically be non-transferable, period.
Not even to the heir who's gonna keep the house. Like if I pass away, Kaylin has the house,
So we're,
it wouldn't be transferable to her.
so we're basically just opening it up a lot more where we're saying that we're no permit fees and.
No, permit fee, yeah, to cover our costs,
Permit
an
fee,
initial
but there's not, it's unexpired, so we won't, there will be no renewal or anything else. So once they get the initial fee, there's a cost, but after the fact, they'll never have a renewal. Is that
and
right?
technically, we won't ever have to do anything with it, so it won't cost the city any money.
But
It'd be
it's
more
still-
aligned with our other special use permits, you know, one time and then they're good to go.
Ah,
There's still the compliance and enforcement side that the city would still maintain and keep up. And that's where
Such
you
as?
want,
what does that involve?
they still have to pay their taxes.
Sure,
They
okay,
still have to make sure that they maintain the building itself. It can't become a,
just like any homeowner.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's still all those, there's still the nuisance ordinance, there's still,
Sure.
if there's complaints or if something goes, south. That's where I like some of the outline with the other one is where it outlines if you violate any of these within the ordinance, after so many complaints, you have to go to a compliance meeting. If you don't show up to the compliance meeting or you don't become compliant after you're put on, this compliance schedule, then they go after you criminally, civilly, whatever methods they need to enforce and basically take you out of business.
So they give you a lot of chances to get right.
Well, you get three, in this ordinance, you get three complaints.
3 strikes.
And then you go before a compliance. If you can't become compliant, then you basically go to the court.
I like that. There's
But
no,
it's structured so that it's not, like, Rick's even said, how do we enforce it? How do we keep, this basically says, we've gotten 3 complaints, this is recorded, this is written, this is documented.
you reached out.
Yeah, and you haven't complied. But this is just like a property owner. It would be high weeds, it'd be junk vehicles, it'd be the condition of the property. If a person who rents the property has a complaint, goes to our police force, says that, the property has a huge water leak and excuse me, and there's mold all in the building, that's because of the health and safety, that is a viable complaint that we would move forward. But then it outlines the process.
Okay, so we're sitting at half an hour, so I'm not sure, I don't think we're ready for you to write anything up yet, because as Councilmember Nance said, he would like the other council members to be here, but are we all leaning toward fee to cover cost and then no renewals to save the homeowner, which gives them some benefit, as Councilmember Stevens was looking for, and as Lori had suggested? What's our consensus right now?
My consensus is you need some more work.
Well, we know that, yeah, but we're trying to see where we're at this point. So Councilmember Sandate, what are your thoughts?
We need to get with the other city councilmen to
To figure out whether.
figure out where we're at.
Okay, Councilmember Nance.
One thing is, sounds like we're changing a lot of things. And I always lean on, ordinances of other cities. And I don't want to be the first one, blazing the path. So I'm wondering if any other cities have done similar things like this, because
San Antonio. So you're gonna send that to all of us to look at,
So I,
correct?
I think you guys need some notes to kind of continue the discussion. You guys have talked about definitions and understanding units, listings, accessory units. And making sure accessory units are livable spaces that can be
Correct.
rented out. Unexpired permitting, that would have to be defined. I know the big discussion was parking, IBC standards, 1 parking space per sleeping unit imposed same as parking ordinance for non-STRs, update parking ordinance for the entire city.
Right.
New builders moving forward, everyone would remain on the same. Understanding the fees, you've come up with a sliding scale or fixed, remove, increase, decrease, dedicate to nonprofits. Some of the feedback from the public has been about what are the benefits for being compliant, what are the permitting process, enforcement, reporting, filing complaints. And then the enforcement really kind of came out through all of it. How do we enforce parking? How do we enforce fees? What does it matter if they, and then putting in some teeth to how do we enforce it. But I think if you're okay with it, I'd like to type up the notes so that you guys see all the options you've discussed, so that the other
Right.
council members can participate as well. And then include a couple of different cities' ordinances for you to review.
And then for those who have been in attendance or who are online, if you would like that information too, that Megan's gonna send to city council, just contact us, either any of your council members or me or the city secretary, and we can email it to you. Just give us your email address. Okay, Councilmember Stevens?
I think there's one thing that we don't have in our ordinance that needs to be in it.
Uh-huh.
And that's, what's our philosophy about property owners? That's why I'm back when Kim was making a comment to me. I think it's important we say, we're after supporting property owners, whether they own their house and live in it or rent it, or whether they're renting it out as a short-term rental. We're trying to ensure equity between the two.
I agree, yeah.
Because that sets the right tone to say, okay, it's not about control. It's not about telling people what they can or can't do. It is about supporting both. And we're trying to put things in place that make sense. Okay. I think the other thing we have to recognize is that short-term rentals are more expensive to own and operate than most people really have a good sense for. Okay. And so to me, providing some background behind it rather than just, here's the law, here's the rules, helps us get where I think we want to be is we're trying to be good neighbors. We're trying to balance it. We're trying to walk that line in a way that makes sense.
And then we're in compliance with the state because Texas is a property owner's right
Exactly.
state. Yeah,
So you could outline that. San Antonio does tiers. And there is one I was saying, I didn't print it off. I can't remember which one. So, and I mentioned to Gio as well. Tier 1 is on location owner, so they live on the property and they're renting out a dwelling. And then tier 2 is offsite STRs where the owner or doesn't live on the actual property. So you could kind of go into that as far as the property owner side of it. And of course, they do regulate this even further in San Antonio because their population density is a little bit different than ours.
I was gonna say, I think Jessica mentioned that, and over 90% of ours are not living on site. He said the gross majority are not on site. Now, they could have a second home here and they have a STR, so they still could be local, but they're not living on the property.
And that could also go into your discussion with fees as far as local and non-local.
Yeah.
And deciding if they're on site, not on site, easily reachable, or I mean, like I said, do they have 2 houses? They still live in Alpine, they're considered local. Those could be some of the benefits of operating in STR.
good. Yep, we have more work. It's more complex than what it initially looks like, because we also want to balance it with people who are just living in their homes, as Councilmember Stevens says. We have some more work on this.
This is why my view, it wasn't just a hand off P and Z, say good luck and come back with a recommendation.
Yeah,
All of the intricacies that go into this.
yeah, it's better handled with council.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything else? right, well, with that, we're gonna conclude this workshop. And I guess we'll have another sometime in the future, or,
It's on our list of 29 items.
yes, okay, and we're.